I'm Greg Hunter. Welcome to USAWatchdog.com. This is going to take the place of the weekly news wrap up on Friday, September 21st, 2018. And I'm bringing on somebody who can help me out because the stories are so fluid and there's so many changes and there's so many things we need to talk about. And I'm going to bring on somebody who is a former orthopedic surgeon, a good one. I'm talking about Dr. Dave Janda. Let's just bring him on while I say nice things about him here. Dave, you went in and out of Washington, D.C. for 30 years, starting with the Reagan administration to talk about health policy, healthcare issues. In that time, going in and out of Washington, consulting and helping them come up with policies. You met a lot of politicians, a lot of law enforcement people, and a lot of intelligence people that you still know today. And that's why I'm bringing you on today, because we're going to have kind of a weekly news wrap-up conversation about big issues. Can you help me?
I'm honored you invited me, and I always look forward to your weekly news wrap-up every week, Greg.
Well, thanks. Well,
I really do. It's outstanding.
You're part of the, well, I know it's low tech, but, I just put everything into the sourcing and everything like that. But anyway, so you're my big sources.
It might be low tech from a guy who used to work at the network media and left the network media because he was honest, but it is chock full of more information that people will ever get from the bought-off, lamestream, fake media in one of your broadcasts than they will get in a month.
I love that bought-off, fake, mainstream. Just the bought-off, fake, lamestream me. I love that. Anyway, well, let's talk. I want to start with this Kavanaugh, which is sickening. I mean, the president's out there saying that I feel sorry for your wife and your little girls. I feel sorry for this because they're painting him as a sexual predator, monster, possible attempted murderer with these charges from this woman. I mean, I just want to cut to the chase. I want to get with your thing. Now she's had her yearbook stuff erased. Some people have gotten that stuff, talking about wild parties and all this other stuff where they drank, where they are so inebriated they couldn't remember anything. That's all been scrubbed. Her attorney supposedly Ford's attorney is supposedly paid for by George Soros in part. There's so much drudgy stuff coming up. Are they going to just go ahead and have they thrown down the gauntlet, which Monday's the day, and you're going to come here and testify behind closed doors or an open session, or we're going to take a vote? Where are they with that?
Well, first of all, I think the way Trump and Senator Grassley, who's in charge of the Senate Judiciary Committee, have handled this has actually been very straightforward and I think excellent. They have both stated, and I think much to the chagrin of the mainstream media and progressives and liberals and globalists alike, where Trump and Grassley have said, look, these are very serious charges and they should not be discounted. And we need to have a hearing on this. And Grassley, and this is obviously under the support of Trump, and the administration has said, look, we can have a public hearing. We can have a private hearing. We can have it so that you don't even have to talk to senators if you are intimidated by senators. You can come here and we'll have our staff talk to you. If you don't feel comfortable coming here, we will fly either us, the senators, or our staff to you in California to discuss this. I'm glad they're handling it this way. I'm very concerned about the charges, and I'm very concerned about how this has been handled as far as the transparency side. Look, if these charges were handed to Dianne Feinstein, like it sounded like it was 6 or 7 weeks ago, why did she sit on it? And since she had this letter, she had privately met with the nominee, with Kavanaugh, and she never brought it up. Now, Greg, I have 2 daughters. You and I are both married. We have very outstanding, strong wives. So women are very important in our lives. I'll tell you something. If I was a senator and I was sent a letter like this, and I had this guy in front of me, I would say, look, what's going on here? Because I have this letter that you need to address. And what bothers me about this Dr. Ford is kind of her track record. She's reportedly has said she doesn't remember what day this occurred. She doesn't remember where it occurred. She doesn't remember how she got to the party. She doesn't remember how she got home from the party.
She was 15 at the time,
right?
Supposedly.
But Greg, when you have, when you have such a reported terrible event occur, and it's terrible, I would think you're going to remember every aspect of it.
It was attempted murder. I mean, that's what she said.
And why was there? And why was there not a police report filed? There's no record that I'm aware of that there was a police report filed. And then why, after she reported this, it came out who she was. Why did she delete? You mentioned about the yearbook stuff, but why did she delete all her social media pages? Why did she delete her pages associated with some of these universities that she's worked at?
Some of this stuff got saved, and it's not very flattering to her. I also heard that she hasn't, A, given up the letter that she got, and B, I've also heard that she got another letter from this woman, doctor, whatever her name is. She got another letter from this woman about Gorsuch.
Right. So reportedly, when Gorsuch was up, Feinstein had gotten a letter that has reportedly since gone missing from this same individual, this Dr. Ford, about Gorsuch assaulting her. And this is what needs to come. This is what needs to be discussed at the hearing. There's also some information, and two of my sources have said, yes, this is correct. One of my sources says they cannot confirm this. But there's this information out there that she has worked as a CIA contractor in the past and possibly even to the present.
Doing what?
Reportedly was involved in the mind control program.
And?
Reportedly had worked at Stanford as a kind of a director of the internship program run by the CIA. But again, two of my sources say that this is in fact accurate. One says they can't confirm it. But the bottom line is here we go again. We need to get to the facts. And the bottom line is that if she was assaulted, well, that's terrible. And we all are, that troubles all of us. But right now, the person, I think she named a Mike Judge, who was in the room, is saying that's fraudulent. I wasn't in the room. This never happened. I never witnessed any kind of event like this. The person that supposedly was backing her up has now backed off and said, no, I never heard about this.
So let's cut to the chase. Let's cut to the end of this, because I want to move on to plenty of other really important things, like a failed coup and a possible war in the Middle East. But they're going to say, listen, you're going to come out here Monday and testify, or we're going to take a vote. I mean, isn't that what this is going to come down to? Because really, yes, this is painfully obvious what this is. In lieu of the fact that we have Keith Ellison and his accuser, Karen Moynihan, who has a police report and medical records that say he abused her physically.
And while he was in office.
Yeah.
This was not 35 years ago.
Yeah. But that's not.
Let's remember, and not to shoot the messenger, but Feinstein, she has a history of sitting on information, right? She sat on this letter for 6 to 7 weeks. Why?
You would have. Any journalist would have led with the best thing they had. If they wanted to knock him out of the box, they'd have led with this, but they wouldn't have. It would have been over in 2 weeks. It would have been all the information would have been out there. Witness would likely. I think she's discredited already.
Well, Feinstein is the same. Opinion. Feinstein is the same senator who had an operative for the Chinese government sitting in her office, meeting with individuals for 20 years.
Dave, no fair.
Let's not talk
about that.
Well, yeah, I know.
No,
It's just
I'm kidding, Jim. I'm kidding.
it's I know, but it's such blatant hypocrisy.
That's correct. That's what I'm telling you. And so,
Right. I
are
mean,
they
whether
going
it's the Ellison thing or find, I mean, come on.
Are they going to vote on Monday or Tuesday? Are they going to vote next week? Are they going to? Because no matter what the Republicans do here, no matter how fair they try to come off, I mean, the mainstream bought off, propaganda media is just going to be unfair. They're just going to lie. You're going to leave out facts, and they're going to lie. So
here's the concern: if this is done in private, okay, I hope there are transcripts, because what's going to happen is they're going to ask her name. And she's going to come out of that room and she's going to go, they were badgering me. I mean, you can just smell it. You can just smell what's going to happen here. So I hope it's going to be in public.
Yeah, I don't think.
And so that everybody can put their eyes on what happened. So there's transparency. Because I think, Greg, you and I and many others, and I'm sure every one of our listeners, has complained, rightfully so, about the lack of transparency that has been present in our government for decades.
Do you think he's going to be voted in next week? I mean, are they going to say, okay, enough? We can see what this is. We're going to be a loser no matter what. We're going to take a vote. Are they going to do that next week?
I think they're going to vote next week. I do. It's going to be interesting to see if she shows up on Monday.
Yeah, because I'd be asking her about her CIA connections.
I would
be
too.
asking her, did you write another letter about Gorsuch to the Senate?
I would too.
Because she'd be under oath. That's not a terrible thing. That's not like, you're ugly and your mother dresses you funny. Did you write another letter about Leo Gorsuch? And she's under oath.
Right.
Did you work for the CIA? Were you a recruiter for the CIA? Is your attorney paid for by George Soros? In part.
I think there's all the
why did you get rid of all
in addition to, why did you scrub your social media pages? Why did you scrub your pages associated with the universities? Why did you not report this to the police when reportedly this happened? What day did this happen? Where did it happen? Who else was in the room? Who did you speak to after? What? I mean, these are all questions that are fair.
Reportedly, she is on before she scrubbed this stuff, and I'd ask her, "Did you say this talking about drunken, nights out where you drank yourself where you couldn't remember anything? Are you involved in all this? Is this the stuff that you got? We do have the NSA. We can get this stuff if you're lying. I think that this is a ruse. In my humble opinion, I think it hurts every woman with a legitimate claim.
Yes, I agree.
I think it hurts the Me Too movement. I think it hurts women who really are abused.
I agree.
I think it hurts Karen Monahan. I think it shows the hypocrisy of that. Here's a woman with a police report and medical records that says she was roughed up, beaten, whatever you want to call it. And that... No.
I completely agree with you.
So you think we're voting next week?
Yes, I do.
Okay, let's.
I think if she doesn't show, if I were running the Senate Judiciary Committee, I'd call for a vote on Kavanaugh on Monday night.
The minute she
doesn't
show,
I'd call for a vote that night.
Yep. Okay. Next up, let's talk about the failed coup, because that's what it is. I mean, the claims from the perpetrators of this stuff, whether it's Clapper, who's pretty quiet, and Brennan, who's now saying, well, this investigation, I don't even know how anybody can talk about this investigation. It's totally illegitimate. We now know what's done illegitimately. Lisa Page came out and said we didn't have anything on Trump for Russian collusion before Mueller was appointed. Totally illegitimate. Total witch hunt, just like the president said. And illegitimate and fraudulent, and I think illegal, and I think felonious. All these people, felonious. Now they're going to unredact all the pages, and now there's word that some of these people are going to defy the president. I'd fire them on the spot. I would tell them, if I find a smudge mark on that page, you're fired.
Look, here's the bottom line.
And besides that, phone records are not classified information. You telling somebody, oh, hey, let's knock off the president, or hey, let's really screw him over in a text message from your iPhone ain't classified. If it is, you broke the law.
Let's look at this another way.
Okay. Let's
pretend Barack Obama was president of the United States, and the same thing was happening to him that's happening to Trump. And Barack Obama says, I want this information declassified. I want the 20 pages of the FISA warrants. I want the texts between Comey and McCabe.
That's
I
going to
want
be
them
interesting.
declassified. I want Bruce Orr's 302 forms that were written up by the FBI declassified. Now, unredacted. Okay? Imagine if, in Trump's case, Pelosi and Schumer, and imagine if the Republican leadership wrote a letter to the Department of Justice and said, don't release any of it and keep everything redacted.
Resist.
Okay. I predict it would take about 2 nanoseconds before the term racist would be thrown out.
Yeah.
Okay. And that this is a racial issue, and that this is unconstitutional, and people need to be immediately terminated and fired.
So what do you suppose is going to happen?
Trump has, it is in his authority to say, declassify these issues, declassify and send it to us unredacted. And I will use Obama's own executive order. Obama's own executive order, authored on December 29th, 2009. People can look it up. Obama Executive Order 13526, entitled Classified National Security Information. This order prescribes a uniform system for classifying, safeguarding, and declassifying national security information, including information related to defense against transnational terrorism. Section 1.7, classification prohibitions and limitations. In no case shall information be classified, continue to be maintained as classified, or fail to be declassified in order to, 1, conceal violations of the law, inefficiency, or administrative error. 2, to prevent embarrassment to a person, organization, or agency. 3, restrain competition. Or 4, prevent or delay the release of information that does not require protection in the interests of the national security. Obama's own executive order.
So
Obama's own executive order. So when anyone, including Pelosi and Schumer, suggests to the Department of Justice that they not declassify, they not send unredacted, they are not only violating Trump's order, they're violating Barack Obama's executive order. So does that mean that Schumer, Pelosi, and anyone who disobeys what Trump has asked, which is in accordance to Obama's executive order, does that mean Schumer and Pelosi are then racist?
what do you think is going to happen? Are they going to declassify it?
I don't think they have a choice.
Are they going to?
And I think they can drag their feet as much as they want, but it's not going to make a difference.
Are they going?
And let's say they do declassify, but they keep it redacted. Trump can unredact it. Boom.
Can't he just fire him? I mean, at this point, isn't Rosenstein and even Wray would be up for grabs here? We're going to find out. We're going to find out what Christopher Wray is all head of the FBI. We're going to find out whether he's a Trump player or not coming up real shortly.
I agree.
And
if they don't go along with this order that is backed up by a Barack Obama executive order, I would fire them.
And I would quote Obama's executive order in the firing: insubordination. Yeah. Insubordination.
I agree.
So you think they're going to, this stuff's, and now let's get into the bigger thing, because it's coming out. This is the firestorm that's going to. You were talking about the text messages between Comey and McCabe, the number one Comey FBI director, and his number two, Andrew McCabe. So, what do you suppose is in these text messages? I've heard there possibly, and I've heard this for a long time, and not from you either, from other people, that there are threats of violence in some of these text messages for multiple parties, including Comey and McCabe. Is that true? Is there threats of violence in some of these text messages against the president? Plots of physical harm?
I have heard very similar reports that there were indications in text messages that were obtained by the Inspector General of the Department of Justice that involved potential threats of violence as it relates to Trump.
Wait. Let me insert.
Sarah Carter just reported yesterday, or actually maybe earlier today, I guess it was, that FBI had two sets of records
Oh
on
my
the
God.
Trump investigation, and Comey and McCabe have been implicated. So here's what was said: two sets of records in the Russian investigation. Certain people above Strzok and Page, that would be Comey and McCabe, were aware of it, implicating former FBI Director James Comey and his number two, Andrew McCabe. And here's what: two sets of records among the upper echelon of the FBI, one that was real and one that was made for appearance.
Oh my God. And when the one
So
that's
imagine,
real,
Greg,
have your
imagine if
sources
you had
told,
two sets of books.
well, yeah, I mean, you're hiding something. Have your sources told you that these threats, and this is, let me put it under the backdrop that nobody has said a word to me about. I haven't even had a troll bring this up. And I have paid trolls. I'm sure you. Yeah, I'm sure you have your own fan club of paid trolls about the 12 attempts on Donald Trump's life. Now that's
My sources stand behind that.
12 attempts, physical attempts to try to kill him, and not just somebody sending a letter saying "I hate you," which also is, I think, probably illegal, and I want to kill you. I mean, anything you cannot threaten the life of the president, but in this case, you're talking about real attempts that failed to kill Donald Trump. Correct?
Correct.
And so,
and we've talked about that before on your show, and
the mainstream media will not.
My sources told me that beforehand, and they have not backed off.
And so, under the backdrop of 12 a dozen attempts on the president's life, actual bona fide attempts to kill him, then you have So you're saying there are going to be revealed text messages between Comey and McCabe, and maybe Comey and the top two guys in the FBI, where they are talking about violence against the president of the United States. Is that what you're telling me?
I have heard very similar reports than what you've heard, Greg. And when I spoke to my sources about threats of violence in these texts, that this is what I had heard, and they said they confirmed it. They said that there is significant harm directed at Trump in these texts.
We're talking about harm like they want to knock him off. They want to kill him.
I don't know the exact wording. I haven't heard the exact wording. All I have heard, and all I know is that I was told that there was violence that was directed toward Trump.
Ew, boy. Did it have anything to do with the 12 attempts on his life?
That I don't know. But I do know this. I know they're absolutely panicking.
That's almost an attempt every 6 weeks.
Of this declassification and the unredacted. Remember, Trump specifically asked for the texts between McCabe and Comey.
And why are they panicking? Why are they panicking?
Well, they're panicking because what's in those texts. They're panicking about what the declassification. The declassification is all about transparency. It's all about reinstitution of the rule of law. I mean, just look at Hillary. Very soon after Trump announced that we're going to declassify, she came up with this incredible tweet storm. Okay, and everybody associates tweet storms with Trump. Let me tell you something. The mother of all tweet storms was Hillary the other night. And let me just hit you with one. Here's what she said. This is right after Trump announced the declassification. This is what she says. You ready? Now there's a term in medical jargon called projection, that you project on others what you're guilty of. Okay?
Okay.
Here we go. Hillary, direct quote from a tweet. Donald Trump refuses to be subject to the law. Okay, Hillary, what about your personal server?
Yeah.
Okay, wait, let's go.
Wait. Just let me add. One of our sources, one of our assets in Iran was hung because his name reportedly went through this server, and also 20 some odd Chinese assets, sources in China were also put to death because their names went through her server.
It's been documented by the Inspector General of the intelligence community that tens of thousands of her emails went directly to China. The number I've heard from my sources is 18 CIA field agents were assassinated after those emails ended up going through that were all based in China.
Treason. Go on.
Yes. So Donald Trump refuses to be subject to the law. Okay, here we go. Next sentence. The legitimacy of our elections is in doubt. Okay, Hillary, so why don't you tell me about Bernie Sanders and how you guys stole the nomination from him about legitimacy of elections?
Yeah.
Okay, she goes on. The president is waging war on the truth. Okay, let's talk truth. How about the fake Russian dossier that she paid for, her campaign paid for, and the DNC paid for, talking about truth? In addition to the umpteen lies Hillary has been involved in over the years.
Yeah, yeah.
She goes on, the administration is undermining the national unity that makes democracy possible. Oh, I guess that would be the unity when she called anyone who didn't support her deplorable. Oh,
Yeah.
okay.
And Biden's out there saying the dregs that anybody who voted for Trump, the dregs of society.
Right. Yeah. So right after this, right, we got Biden out there shooting a bazoo off about this is deadly earnest. We are in a fight for America's soul. They're a small percentage of the American people, virulent people. Some of them, the dregs of society. End quote. Right. Okay. So here she goes. So that's good old Joe. So the administration is undermining the national unity that makes it. And then she ends with this. And then there's the breathtaking corruption. Okay, great. Let's talk corruption. Uranium One, right? She cleans 145 million bucks on a pay-to-play scam into her foundation. Billy Boy makes another 500 grand talking to a Moscow bank and selling 20% of our uranium supply to the Russians. Why don't we talk about the personal server, as you've mentioned?
Well, hold on, let's back up.
In Iran, 18 dead in China.
Let's back up. We had Dennis Campbell, who was a 6-year undercover source by the CIA and the FBI, who had 5,000 pages of documents, eyewitness testimony, and video, reportedly, of espionage, racketeering, money laundering, to back up all that, money laundering, fraud, treason, sedition, the whole line. That includes Robert Mueller, who was the head of the FBI, while he was employing this guy for 6 years, Campbell, who testified to 3 different committees that put this all out there. So just so this isn't some kind of like homebrew, some kind of crazy time, internet myth, this is all documented. And she's in such big trouble just for that. And so is Robert Mueller, who committed treason. But anyway, I interrupted. Go on.
No, and that was the extent of her one tweet out of a tweet storm. No, they're panicked.
Why?
Whether it's Biden,
explain that.
Hillary,
Explain the panic. Explain the panic. The panic. Explain the panic. The panic. I'm sorry, I can't talk.
Because they are, as deep state players, they're middle level puppets, if you will, the deep state. But they're panicked because of the transparency. You see, the way the deep state works, they work in the dark. They're cockroaches. And this is how they get more power and control and more money, by working in the dark, in a criminal element. And what this disclosure, what this declassification does, is it puts in the open in front of the American public how the Obama administration, their Department of Justice and the FBI, tried to overturn a duly elected president of the United States and utilize and weaponized the FBI, the Department of Justice, just to name 2, in this seditious behavior.
Let me back up here just for a second, because I have a theory, and I want you to either throw a big bucket of cold water or add to it. And my theory is they're going to have a solid 5-4 court with Kavanaugh seated on the bench before the indictments, which supposedly are something like 50,000, before the indictments, at least part of them, roll out in the series, as you've said before. But I think, is that right? Is that the timing? Kavanaugh is going to be seated, is going to be voted on in a yay, and he's going to be taking his role, because as soon as he votes in, he's in. As soon as they say you're in, confirmed, boom, he's on the court, correct?
Correct. Remember, the last thing the deep state wants is restitution of the rule of law that has been stripped of us over many decades' time.
And them trying to stop...
And having that majority in the Supreme Court is part of that.
Okay, so this is why they're fighting so hard. Lying, cheating, putting anything they can. The mainstream media is helping them, which I think is seditious and treasonous, actually, because they ignore... I've been reading stories from the AP. They leave out all this stuff. I mean, it's just sickening. The Associated Press, the Washington Post, the New York Times. Sickening, 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 treasonous, seditious propaganda bought off lamestream media, as you say. But isn't that a marker right there, trying to get Kavanaugh, once he's voted in, let the indictments begin? Is that correct?
Yes, and remember, with the restitution of the rule of law, and that's what this declassification, this is the trigger. And this is why they're all panicked, why Hillary is in panic mode. What she said, what Joe Biden said, what this Eric Swalwell, who's a congressman out in California, is saying about, oh, this is going to compromise national security. Whether it's the letter Pelosi and Schumer sent to the Department of Justice saying, don't honor the president's request. This is not from a position of power. This
That is
from
seditious,
a
incidentally.
position of weakness. They're weak. They're losing. And add to that, Greg, as I understand it, there are a number of people that have flipped, that are testifying against their higher ups. It's my understanding that Lisa Page flipped early. The Inspector General of the Department of Justice, Michael Horowitz, flipped her as early as January 2017.
Woo.
It's my understanding that James Baker, the former general counsel to the FBI, has flipped. It's my understanding that Bill Prestep, the lead FBI agent in charge of counterintelligence, has flipped. They are panicked. Rats are turning on rats.
Lisa Page, you and I have talked about this, and they flipped her so early that, remember they were talking about all these off-site meetings, secret society meetings?
Yeah.
And I said, as a TV guy, I'd want her to wear a wire. I'd want to hear these people say, let's kill Donald Trump, let's go after him, let's do whatever, I'd want to hear, and I see him be even better, but I'd want to hear him say that. You think she wore a wire to some of these off-site meetings?
I'm going to tell you this. I believe the modern day equivalent of Deep Throat from Watergate is Lisa Page.
In a real story, not the Watergate squirt gun fight, which is nothing. Bob Woodward, if you're listening to this, give back your Pulitzer. Mr. Bernstein, give back your Pulitzer. That was a squirt gun fight. It didn't involve national security. It didn't involve payoffs. A global charity scam. A failed coup. A frame job of an incoming president. Please, give back your Pulitzers. You're lying. Oh, and Bob Woodward said he's got sources for his book. Hey, Bob, guess what, buddy? I've got 10 sources to say you're full of horse hooey. I win. I can't name my sources, though, Bobby.
Greg, there are people that are saying, look, we haven't seen any big perp walks of any big people. Look, I'm holding a list of 26 people in the FBI and Department of Justice, all at high levels, that have either been fired or resigned.
Some or all are going to jail, right? Some or all are going to jail.
Yes, and I believe, two of whom are going to be Comey, the former director of the FBI under the Obama administration, and John Brennan, the former director of the CIA under Obama.
You think they're going?
And I believe it's going to be sooner rather than later.
So the big trigger is Kavanaugh being seated. That's why they're fighting so hard.
Well, and remember, when they came up with this thing about holding off the vote on Kavanaugh, they played their hand, right? So what was Trump's hand that he played? The hand he played was, okay, we're going to declassify everything and everything is unredacted. And that's when they went nuts.
Yeah, they're all
because it's about transparency, and they can't survive when the system is made transparent.
Yeah.
So right now we got rats turning on rats. We got hysterics coming out of Hillary Clinton, Joe Biden, Nancy Pelosi, Chuck Schumer, this Swalwell character running for Congress who's on the MSNBC, CNN all the time. You know, we have the rats testifying against other rats. We have, and it's something we mentioned last time. What I was told is this declassification is going to trigger a couple other things. It's going to trigger, if you will, an acknowledgement that the military tribunals that you and I spoke about last time have been in fact operational.
Wait, stop. I'm going to come back in here with you. I'm sorry. I want to make sure I get this. You're saying that the military tribunals aren't coming. They have already been taking place at Guantanamo Bay. Is that what you're telling me?
I don't know about Guantanamo Bay,
but
I can tell you that I have been told that military tribunals are not just going to happen; they have been in place and they have been operational. Is the word I was told.
Already going on. They're already taking people to task in military tribunals.
That is my understanding from my sources that I trust. And what I was also told is that this declassification will ultimately lead to the Attorney General, Jeff Sessions, to, at least on a partial basis, if not complete basis, to unrecuse himself. And it will lead to the coming forward of a parallel investigation that has been ongoing between the Inspector General of the Department of Justice, Michael Horowitz, and Huber, who is a prosecutor from Utah, who Sessions brought into the mix to work with Horowitz.
I want to talk about Loretta Lynch. Now, hopefully I'm not spilling any beans here, but I heard she's also rolling over. That she's, I think she's a grandmother. And I don't think she wants to spend the next 20 or 30 years, which would be a death sentence, in federal prison for the Clintons and for Obama. Is she talking, Loretta Lynch?
I think if she isn't talking, she's in huge trouble.
Are your sources telling you that she's talking, or can you confirm or deny that Loretta Lynch is talking?
I've heard from one source that she's talking.
The first question I would say, what'd you say on the airplane? And don't tell me you talked about your grandkids. I mean, and that would be the first question. What did former President Bill Clinton and you talk about for 30 minutes, whatever, 33, I don't know, something like that. What did you talk about on your plane? And it was an arranged meeting, correct? Because it was arranged.
It was arranged. It's my understanding that there was prior arrangement between her security detail and Bill Clinton's Secret Service detail.
So what did you talk about? That's the question, right?
Great question.
Other questions would be, she also supposedly has, it wasn't just the FISA warrants, that she did some emergency surveillance warrants against Donald Trump.
Well, one of the concerns that my sources have had, and I have after listening to them, is that when it came to Carter Page and the FISA warrant, that the initial FISA warrant never went in front of a judge, that it actually went to her on an emergency basis. She approved the surveillance, the tapping, the surveillance of Carter Page.
Oh, man.
And that was in effect for which she could do as Attorney General on an emergency basis, but she did that. It was in place for a week, and then she went back to the FISA court and had a particular judge rubber stamp the ongoing surveillance of Carter Page.
This is the FISA warrant that they used, and they used every time. They included the phony, they keep calling it unverified, phony, made up, stupid, made up lies to frame the president. This is what they included as proof. Every time, correct?
Correct.
And she signed off on it.
This is about the framing. This is about the framing of not just Trump, but his team, of which I believe General Flynn was framed in that. I believe he is an innocent man and is an incredible patriot. And Comey himself testified under oath that he felt that Flynn did not lie.
Yeah, it's disgusting. They made him out to be some Russian spy, some complete treasonous. It's just really disgusting.
Well, their big smoking gun evidence against General Flynn is he was at a dinner in, it might have been St. Petersburg or Moscow, and Putin was at that dinner, which is all true. But how about this? If you see a picture of that dinner, Putin's at the table, Flynn is at that table, but you know who else is at that table? Actually, I think, if I remember correctly, sitting in between Putin and Flynn was Jill Stein.
You're kidding.
No. Jill Stein was at that same dinner.
Ugh, man, oh man.
And that was the smoking gun evidence that Mike Flynn was working for the Russians.
Let's move on. I want to get two more things up before we go on for this wrap up, because this is very interesting. And just so people know, listen, I know I'm talking more than I normally do during an interview. Don't write me and tell me to shut up and stuff like that. We're just going to.
This is your weekly wrap, man.
This is my wrap up. So I just brought Dave on to have a conversation so I could really query him, dig down. And there's been a couple times where I've kind of interrupted, but all these people have rolled over. Loretta Lynch has rolled over. Lisa Page has rolled over. Bruce Orr, the number 4 at one time at the Justice Department, rolled over. Many people have rolled. Do you think DNI Clapper, James Clapper, has rolled over? Because he's the one that came out and said, basically, in a sense, and I'm not going to have an exact verbatim on this, but he basically said it was all Obama's fault. He, quote, tasked us, the intel agencies, to do this, including Robert Mueller's investigation. Has he rolled over?
I believe he has. In fact, you're absolutely right. He said that to Anderson Cooper on CNN.
Yes, you can hear it for yourself.
Right? And and not too long after that, he also, when Brennan was shooting his mouth off, he made some derogatory comment about Brennan.
So he's trying to cut himself a better deal.
I think he is. I think a lot of people are. Look, Greg.
What about Rice and Jarrett and Powers and all these people at the Obama White House? What about all that? Is that something? Are they cutting deals? Because they're awful quiet.
Yeah, they're awfully quiet, and I haven't heard deals about them.
How about Obama? Anything about Obama? Has he been trying to run into and trying to contact Trump to cut his own deal? I mean, evidently everybody's cutting a deal. That's what it sounds like to me.
Yeah. Do I believe Barack Obama has reached out to Donald Trump
Yes.
to try to talk to him about issues? And I don't mean, let me give you some advice, but hey, we need to talk. I believe he has.
In other words, we need to talk about the failed coup that I tried to put against you and the people that work for you, and try to imprison everybody I could up the line to squeeze your people just to come up and lie about you and try to kick your tail out of office. You know, that's what we're talking about that.
I think he might have tried to institute a conversation with Trump, trying to protect himself.
And what happened?
The word I heard is I don't think it went well for Obama.
Hold on, we're breaking a little news here. You're telling me, if I get this right, that your sources say Barack Obama reached out to Donald Trump and said, we need to talk about this failed coup, basically. And Trump told him, you can go, take a walk? Is that what you're telling me?
I have one source that told me that Obama had reached out to Trump about a meeting, and that the meeting did not go well for Obama.
Oh, we did have a meeting.
I'm just telling what I was told.
And you're saying that he did have a meeting with Obama, who's trying to save himself.
It was my understanding that Obama had reached out to Trump. This is what I was told. And was trying to not cut a deal, but, well, maybe cut a deal. And that Trump is firmly in the camp of restitution of the rule of law, no matter who it involves.
Well, we've talked about this, and listen, I did stuff on this with Joe Arpaio and his team of professional police investigators who said his birth certificate, Obama's, was a computer-generated lie. Then they doubled down on that. And, the mainstream press...
Well, anyone who speaks about that, Greg, it's conspiracy theory, it's truther movement, it's the whole thing.
That's never been confirmed that it wasn't.
Here's my position on it.
Okay.
I have never seen a deep dissection from the bought-off mainstream fake media on the information that Joe Arpaio and his team produced. Have you?
No, that's why I took him to task. I mean, New York Times, Wall Street Journal. Hey, y'all, this is on the internet. I'm a former investigative reporter. This is an easy one.
Right? No. So I understand
hire
they shoot the messenger and they denigrate his message.
Correct.
I get that. That's their MO. But I have yet to see them look at the information that Arpaio and his team accumulated, not just on a weekend, but over many, many months' time. I have never seen anyone from the globalist-controlled fake media look at that information and go, well, here's where they're wrong, and here's where they're wrong, and here's where it's fraudulent, and here's where it's...
No way.
I've never seen that. Now, maybe I've missed that, but I've looked.
No, I haven't seen it either. And I even ticked them to task on that, saying, that's an easy one, folks. If you wanted to embarrass Joe Arpaio, you'd hire yourself a consultant, a former FBI guy, Get Bill Binney. How about Bill Binney? Get somebody who can come on and say, oh, no, they're crazy. That's cray-cray. But no, they didn't happen.
And what they're going to counter with is, well, Arpaio, he was found guilty of such and such, and he was actually pardoned by Trump, so he's not a credible source.
Vindictive.
But I'm just telling you what they're going to say. The point is, enough of that. Enough of finger pointing at the guy. I want you to look at the evidence.
And what about his college transcripts? Nobody, they talked all about other people whose college transcripts may have had some, some things in the transcripts, which is an amazing thing to have his college transcripts to be sealed. Barack Obama. Why? And nobody asked why. Why is your college career sealed? I mean, George Bush's transcripts were out there. John McCain's transcripts were out there. What he did.
And it's not just his college transcripts. I mean, look, I've gone through this graduate school deal. I worked on admissions both at the when I was at college for the admissions committee and in medical school for our medical school. Yeah. And when I was at my residency, I worked on the admissions program for people to get in the residency program. So I've kind of been involved in the process on a number of different levels: college, medical school, residency, and I have never come across a candidate, and I've gone through hundreds of candidates at these different levels, and I've never come across a candidate whose transcripts were not available.
Yeah.
And I can assure you that if I can, and maybe I'm closed-minded, I don't know, but if I came across somebody whose transcripts were unable to be viewed, I would not have recommended admission.
And they lynched Ben Carson, high-tech lynching, over lies about his transcript. He's one of the most brilliant pediatric neurosurgeons in the country, in the world. Made him out to be a blind buffoon, which is, it's just sickening. So I want to move on. So that breaks the little news there. Boy, Obama, so just want to make sure. Obama asked for a meeting with Donald Trump. He gave him one, and it didn't go good for Obama.
That's what I was told by one source.
Okay.
Not several, just one source.
Okay, good enough. We're going to put that out there. All right, fine. Next up, I want to talk about Syria and Donald Trump and the downing of a Russian plane. They said it was the Syrian air defenses. Other people say it was the Israelis. Some people say it was a French ship. The globalists are using to shoot down a Russian plane, and Putin didn't take the bait. And now we know why it was so important for Putin and Trump to meet, not only just in Finland, but on Air Force One, which has never been refuted. Even the trolls won't touch that. So now we know why it was so important for Trump and Putin to be, so they wouldn't get World War III started on them.
Well, look.
So tell me about this downing of this Russian jet.
Well, first of all, whether it's Trump speaking with Putin or Trump speaking with Kim in North Korea, many people have denigrated Trump for doing so because he's dealing with tyrants. Well, you know what? Sometimes you have to talk. Sometimes you have to do business with really bad people. And I don't think Trump has ever said Putin and Kim are great people. But sometimes you have to do business with these people for the greater good of society.
Yeah, because...
And let's face it, both Putin and Kim can cause a nuclear holocaust anywhere they want in the world.
Yeah.
So the fact that Trump would open lines of negotiation and détente with these two individuals, I don't see as a negative. I see as a positive. And the only people that see this as a negative are either globalists and their playbook is all about chaos and war and destruction and murder and death. And there isn't a war they haven't loved. Because let's face it, all of us useless eaters die in those wars. You don't see a Rothschild or a Rockefeller or a Pessoa or a Lazard or Seif or Pincus or Warburg dying in those in wars. No, the bottom line is that détente with Russia, with North Korea, could well prevent a nuclear war. And I think it goes back to what just happened in Syria. Notice the timing, Greg. The night Trump talks about declassification, and Hillary is panicked and tweet storming up craziness, and Biden is going crazy, and the Falwell character in California is going crazy. Oh, and Adam Schiff. How about Adam Schiff?
Yeah.
That little special dude. He comes out and he tweets, if Trump continues this, he's going to cross a red line. Greg, what's red line? What's red line? What's he threatening? What's Schiff? What is that? What is Schiff threatening? To me, That was a veiled threat and an assassination.
Yeah.
Okay? So we got all these people acting crazy that are owned and operated by the globalists, puppets of the globalists, mid-level people of the globalists. And next thing you know, this thing blows up in Syria that night. So what happens? We had a Russian plane that was coming in for a landing in Syria, and Israel sent fighters in and were bombing sites in Syria, and they gave the Russians 1 minute notice that they were going to do this. So reportedly, the Syrian, and there was a French frigate in the water, and reportedly the Syrian air defenses shot up to go after these Israeli fighters that were coming in, and because the Russian plane was larger and had a larger footprint, the Syrian missiles reportedly hit the Russian plane and it went down. Now, there were reports that a missile came from this French frigate, but nobody talked about where that hit. The word I heard was that, in fact, what happened was that, yes, Israel brought these planes in. They utilized this Russian plane to take the hit from the Syrian air missile defenses. I think there were S-200 devices. And what happened was, what ultimately hit that Russian plane, as I understand it, was the missile from the French frigate. Now,
why?
The hope was that Putin would go off and he would then attack that French frigate. Now, because that would be an attack on France,
NATO,
which is a member of NATO, and all the members of NATO are the policy is, if one nation is attacked, we're all attacked, and we open up on whoever attacked us. I believe they tried to bait Putin into attacking that French frigate and institute a potential war, which is what the deep state wants. As we've said, the financial system worldwide is crumbling, and they need an event to cover for that financial collapse, because they don't want anyone pointing the finger at them, the deep state, the central bankers, the criminal and national banking syndicate. They want people to point a finger at, well, Putin. He blew that French frigate out of the water.
And everything was going great until he started a war.
That's right. But what Putin did, and people say, oh, this is a sign of weakness. No. I believe what he did is he said, wait a minute. What are they trying to get me to do here, and what are they trying to pull off? And it could well be it comes down to the fact that if he hadn't established this relationship with Trump, that maybe he would have pulled that card and attacked that frigate. But instead, what did he do? He did not attack that French frigate. He thought about it, and what he did is he said, I'll tell you what, this is really bad. Israel used our plane to block their fighters, and it appears that the Syrian air defense with these S-200s took our plane down. So what we're going to do, so what Putin did is he tried to make lemonade out of lemons. Putin says, I'll tell you what we're going to do is we're going to bring the upgraded S-400 systems in to Syria, and that is a more highly sophisticated device for missile defense, so that this cannot happen again. But what it does do is it actually plays into Putin's hand, so that if next time any fighters, whether they're from Israel or wherever they are, if they're up against an S-400 system, they're done. So what Putin essentially did is he, out of this event that could have led to World War III, what Putin did is he essentially locked the airspace in Syria.
Yep. Which is what I want to get to the financial situation. And it's something I wanted to bring. I wanted to bring up one thing real quick. It's about something I got wrong. I said in one of the interviews I did, and I can't remember, just a week or so ago, that they stopped selling 2018 Silver Eagles, which they did, and they weren't going to sell them until 2018. I got that wrong. It was temporary. They have restarted selling these coins, but what it does show, and I got this from several coin dealers. One of them, Discount Gold and Silver, who's my coin dealer on the on the site, which I don't make anything on. She just buys advertising. She says, no, this happens. This has happened in the past, but it does show big demand for silver. And then I wanted to, so I have that little, my bad, I got that wrong. And then I wanted to talk about Turkey. And, this just kind of flew right under the radar. And it was, they had to sell $4.5 billion in gold. Excuse me? They had to sell $4.5 billion in gold to stem their currency crisis. I think the U.S. got that gold. Somebody got that gold. I would say somebody with the SWIFT system, the U.S., got that gold. We are teetering. I mean, even though we're having record high after record high on the stock market, and I think the NASDAQ, the S&P, and the Dow for sure, record high after record high on the stock markets and the markets, things aren't going great, are they?
No, they're not. I mean, look, Greg, this is part of the deep state. This is part of the globalist syndicate's playbook, right? And a guest I've had on my show, John Perkins, wrote the book Confessions of an Economic Hitman.
Yeah, I've had him on.
He's a great guest, but he gives you the business plan, the business model, right? So remember, Venezuela was going down, right? What was the first thing they got out of them?
Gold.
When they took Gaddafi down, did they get his gold and silver?
144 tons, right?
Yeah, right. Remember when Ukraine had this coup, right?
Yep.
Weren't there reports that gold was leaving in planes out of the Ukraine?
Yeah, went to the U.S.
Yeah.
I think Gaddafi's gold went to the U.K. I think his gold went there.
Well, I think right. I think it went in Western hands.
Right. Because they sold it all to China, and Russia, who have been buying gold. So things aren't going that great, even though the window dressing is, unemployment's at an all-time low. According to John Williams, it's not. It has come down. And listen, I don't want people to think I'm bashing Trump. I like Trump.
No. But you have to be truthful.
Yeah, I mean, listen, he walked into office with $20 trillion and $20 trillion in debt, 19 trillion, something like that. I mean, it's just, what's a trillion? It's sickening, isn't it? I mean, what's $1 trillion? And then we find out from Dr. Mark Skidmore, which I interviewed, and then 4 days after I did this big rollout interview with him, they audited the DOD. This is DOD, 21 missing $1 trillion from the DOD and HUD, which Dr. Mark Skidmore's PhD economics at Michigan State University did with a team of people, got the information off the government databases, which have now been shut down. And now they've come out and said, we're not going to find out about that. That's a national security issue. And we talked about this, and I said, is Trump and his administration pissed that I keep beating this $21 trillion? I mean, that's a lot of money. This isn't like $500 million in, skunk works, or $1 trillion, or what Rumsfeld said, 2.3 trillion missing from the Pentagon. I mean, back in 9/10, 2001, the day before 9/11. But this is $21 trillion. I mean, what is the Trump administration has to know now? This figure's in play. And they have to have a plan to take care of this, because we're going to reinstate the rule of law and we're going to reset the financial system. Would you talk a little bit about how this is going to come down? Do you know how this is going to come down with your sources? Well, am I making Trump mad by bringing it?
There's supposition about how things are going to come down. You did a great interview last week with Catherine Austin Fitts.
Yeah.
And I'm actually going to have her on my show this coming week. She's a regular on your show. She's been very regular, a guest on my show. Catherine gave great insight as far as what's really happening and what people need to do to protect themselves. The financial, if you listen to the Stuart Varneys on Fox Business News, or all these dweebs on CNBS, as I call it, CNBC, CNBS, I think you're being misled. And I think the stock market hitting new highs, I believe, is smoke and mirrors. I think it's a mirage. And I think it's kind of meant to, as Jim Sinclair talks about, manipulation of perception. And that's what's going on here with numbers. But I think it can only last so long. And I do believe that Trump is the president for a reason. And there are many reasons. But I think one of the reasons is that Donald Trump has an excellent track record in bankruptcy, in getting companies, organizations out of bankruptcy. And I believe if you look at the numbers analytically, our country and the world's financial system is bankrupt.
Yeah, I mean the overarching number is 250, nearly 250 trillion in debt. And the last credit crisis, which was a debt crisis, was 160 or 70 trillion in debt, and we just packed it on, stacked it on. We have a debt problem. We have a debt crisis. That's the problem.
I agree.
And is Trump mad at me for bringing this up over and over again? This 21 trillion. I asked you about it, and you went,
No.
no. Why?
Not
Why
that
is he not mad?
No, not that I'm. Look, I believe underlying Trump's administration, and people will disagree with me on this, and I get it, but it's transparency. It's just like this declassification issue. That's about transparency. And I believe the reason why the Trump administration is not mad at you or me talking about this $21 trillion.
Additional to the 21 trillion we already owe.
That's correct. In addition to our national debt of $21 trillion,
Yep.
there's another $21 trillion just from the Defense Department and the Housing and Urban Development Department between 1998 and 2015,
Correct.
according to Catherine Austin Fitts and Dr. Mark Skidmore's work, as you've outlined. There's another $21 trillion that's off the books, that's missing. And as you mentioned, the latest thing that Mark got from the Inspector General's office of the Department of Defense is well, we're changing the accounting rules so that if it's in the national security interest of the country, you don't have to be accurate with your numbers. Now, as crazy as that sounds, that's already in place for the private sector.
Yeah.
Right? So one of the issues that's been kicking around for a decade or more is that the financial markets are manipulated, and reportedly George Bush had some executive order on the book saying, hey, in the national security interests of the United States, you can fudge your books, big banks.
So you don't have to go declare bankruptcy.
Right.
I mean, they made it a national security issue, and to me, it just tells me that, come on, they're buying time. I mean, they're not serious. You're not serious. You're going to pretend that went away. That's like a guy with gangrene. He's got a pair of shorts on. You go, wow, your leg's black. And you go, oh yeah, it is. Hold on a minute. Goes into his bedroom, comes back out with shoes and socks and pants on, and goes, see, I took care of it. No more gangrene.
And I think your statement's very accurate. Buying time, because I think what's going to happen is once the restitution of the rule of law is put in place. Now, we have that going on with 68 new judges that have been appointed through Trump recently. What is the number? 41 federal district court appointments, 26 appeals court, 1 Supreme Court pending. Between that and these tribunals, I believe that sets the stage for the restitution of the rule of law. And you have to have the rule of law restored. The court systems packed with judges who are going to follow the Constitution before you can address this financial reset. So I think right now, is Trump being transparent about what's really happening behind the curtain financially? No, I don't believe he is. I believe he's buying time. But I do believe he is going to step up once all these pieces are in place about the restitution of the rule of law, and a big step was taken with this declassification order. What's going to happen is that once the rule of law is being reset, then I think you're going to see some clarity and transparency as it relates to the financial world.
This is going to be, I don't see how this is going to be anything but rough. I mean, there's going to be a lot of people that are going to get paid a lot less money. I will say this, though, and we haven't talked about this. He signed this executive order in 2017, December 21st. You know about it, about corruption and human trafficking. Okay.
Yes.
I don't think it was human trafficking. It was something else. Basically, it was human trafficking. I think
yes,
it was. I don't know, crimes against humanity or whatever, human trafficking. Anyway, he talked about confiscation of assets. And, are the Rockefellers and the Soroses and the Pacer family, the Rothschild family, are these people's assets going to be up for grabs?
I think if they're not, then you're really not reinstituting the rule of law.
You think that this is going all the way to the top families, this corrupt criminal deal is the top families' wealth is going to be confiscated, and they have the paperwork that shows they were willing participants in the fraud, the treason, the sedition, the espionage, the undermining of democracy. You're saying that these top people's money is going to get taken, and their assets.
I believe it has to, in a sense that if it's not, then everything that they're talking about restitution of the rule of law and restitution of the financial system is all smoke and mirrors.
So some people,
if you don't cut the head of the snake off, this does not go away.
So some people's pensions and retirements, although I can't believe this is going to go without pain for the general population, but they're going to try and minimize the pain, saying, hey, you lost some of your money, but we're going to give you some of it back because we.
And I think that's why it goes back to your statement, buying time. I think he's buying time in order to try to make the transition the least painful for the American public as they can. And I do believe there's going to be pain. I do. And I've said it on my radio show countless times.
Yeah. That
when the system resets, there's going to be supply chain problems. You need to be prepared. I know for a fact, Greg, you're prepared. We're prepared. There's certain things you need to do. And people will denigrate you. They will call you a prepper. They will call you a bunker mentality. They will make all kinds of fun of you until it hits. And then they'll be at your front door begging for help.
Yeah, well, if you lived in a hurricane state or lived on the coast of North Carolina, right, you keep batteries and 3 weeks of water and food all the time because right, you can get crushed. Do you think we're going to have a new currency? Do you think we get a new currency out of this and we have Federal Reserve notes? I mean, these are notes, these are debt instruments. The debt's no good. They're not going to pay it all back. They can't pay it all back. They can't pay back $42 trillion. They're not going to pay back $21 trillion. They can't pay back $250 trillion in debt. We can't have it. There's going to have to be a massive default, a jubilee. What do you think that's going to happen? Can you talk about that? Do you have any sources?
Well, here's what I believe is that, and I'm not aware of a paper currency that has survived in the history of the world.
Yes, correct. That's a fact.
And I don't understand why
fiat
the
currency.
US dollar, the current U.S. Federal Reserve note, would be the first in world history to survive.
So
especially when it's not backed by anything.
You think the reset would come with a new currency?
Yeah, I do think the U.S. dollar, a number of people have spoken about this that are far more intelligent, far more knowledgeable in the world of monetary policy and monetary history. But I don't see how the long-term prospects of the United States Federal Reserve note is going to survive.
What did I say I wanted to get in here? And I just thought about it. Mike Pompeo and him ripping John Kerry, who's stupid, a new one, over his coming out and saying, I've had 3 or 4 meetings with top Iranians, along with Keith Ellison and other people in Congress meeting with the Iranians, the #1 state sponsor of terror, according to our State Department, and even that so under Hillary Clinton's State Department, under John Kerry's State Department, under Mike Pompeo's, Rex Tillerson's State Department, under Mike Pompeo's State Department. Kerry's got to be he's got some brass kahunas, I'll tell you that, for him to say that he's talking with the Iranians and trying to save the no signature deal, the one that you described where pallets and C-130s with pallets of cash went into Tehran. I mean, he's going to go down too, isn't he? Isn't this whole deal going to go down in a ball of flames?
Well, I think Pompeo
unsigned. Go ahead.
Yeah, Pompeo's been very upfront about what Kerry did.
Undermined our foreign policy.
Right. It's harmful to the United States and to every American citizen. Now, the question, Kerry's not a dumb guy. Right? He's not a dumb guy. He might be corrupt. He might be owned and operated by the syndicate. But he knew what he was doing was a violation of the Logan Act, violation of the law, and really a violation of truly ethics.
Do you think he's part of the ones going down? He's got a warrant, a sealed indictment with his name on it.
Well, the question is, why would he do that? Why would he do that? And was it that he was told to do that by people who have something on him? Maybe, I don't know. But all I know is what he did was ethically wrong, and I believe legally wrong.
Oh, yeah, to deal with the number one state.
And he should be held accountable.
To deal with the number one state sponsor of terror on your own and have multiple meetings and think you're doing everybody a favor when you flew pallets of cash in. He's the one sat in Congress and said he didn't know what was in it. So,
and as you have outlined, Greg, on numerous occasions.
No signatures on this deal. I just want to make sure that's according to a letter from
right, and that's exactly where I was going.
Okay.
That it was a deal that was not signed.
Which had a drug component in it, according to your sources.
Right, and when we talked about that 2 visits ago, when I spoke about that with you, what kind of blowback did you get on that statement?
I got none. I heard that you were, I don't know if I can bring this up. Can I bring up the Obama story about he was showed our interview?
No.
Okay. Well, I don't think anybody involved would be happy with that.
No, that was my understanding.
That nobody was happy with that.
Correct.
The gold. The gold is going to take a moonshot. Is that your understanding? Is that what you think? Because they're going to have to tie the economy. I know we're already, I think the U.S. is now the number one exporter of oil in the world.
Well, right now, if you go to Venezuela or Iran,
yeah,
or Turkey or Brazil or Argentina, and you look at what the price of gold is or silver, it's astronomical. And what history tells us over 5,000 years is that when it hits the fan on a currency, when it hits the fan financially, the 2 entities that do very well in those type of environments as far as purchasing power are gold and silver.
The first hint that Turkey got into a currency crisis, what was the first thing they sold? $4.5 billion of their gold.
And that's exactly what the deep state wanted. The deep state puts these countries in harm's way, in financial straits, so they can extract as much precious metals as they can.
I'll tell you, Dave, I'm going to wrap up our week. This is the longest weekly wrap-up I've ever done. Having a conversation with you about and getting your brain power involved and your experience involved in Washington and your sources has been very interesting. Very, very. And this the reason why I did it because it's just so many fluid statements that I need to quote you on that this way I could get it done. Anything on the horizon? Do you think is October going to be? When do these indictments going to start rolling out? The first wave, you think? Is it after Kavanaugh is seated?
Well, what I was initially told, it was after the primaries, and I don't know if we have any primaries yet to happen. Now we've had Chris Collins indicted in New York. We've had Duncan Hunter indicted.
Those are Republicans,
right? In California. We've had the 100 priests indicted on the pedophile human trafficking issues. We've had, I think, 19 people in North Carolina indicted on
voter fraud.
On voter fraud, right? And remember, when it comes to these sealed indictments, some of these indictments are never going to be opened. But what you're going to see is, I believe, these people leaving the House of Representatives, people leaving the Senate, people leaving big business, people leaving Hollywood, people leaving multiple departments throughout the government. I believe these are not people involved in the pedophile networks or human trafficking, but these are people that are involved in bribery or some form of blackmail based on some financial transactions they've had or whatever it might be. I believe they're shown the indictment. They say you got an option. You can leave and never come back, or we can open this indictment and try to stay around. And I believe that's why we're seeing the turnover in Washington at every department in the government, including Congress, including the House of Representatives and the Senate. I believe it's why we're seeing this mass exodus out of big businesses around the country, including Wall Street, and why we're seeing these mass exodus out of people out of Hollywood.
And they have to give up something to not. They have to give something.
Right. So it's not that you just have to leave and not come back, but we need this piece of information from you as it relates to so-and-so or somebody higher up the food chain.
Yeah, Kavanaugh's going to get seated next week. I think that's the big trigger. I think that's why they're going crazy, because once he gets seated, boy, let the games begin. I mean, let the indictments come.
And I think in addition to that, the trigger here is this declassification by Trump.
Yeah. Because these cases are going to go, especially if you're talking about Obama, that case is going to go right to the Supreme Court.
I think this is going to open the eyes of a lot of people, this declassified, unredacted information. I believe it's going to lead to a move by Sessions. I believe you're going to see multiple moves by Horowitz and Huber. But I think and yes, with Kavanaugh, but I believe the trigger is this declassification. And the reason why I believe that is because of the reaction, as we've spoken of earlier. Hillary Clinton, Joe Biden, the Falwell character, Pelosi, Schumer, the deep state trying to start a war in Syria the night that this declassification happened. I believe these are all indicators of the magnitude of what that represents.
And so you think the next couple of months are going to be rough? I mean, you start rolling out indictments on John Brennan and James Comey.
I think it's going to be rough for many people that have been locked into the propaganda.
Yeah.
Many people that have devoured the false narrative, that believe the false narrative. I believe the vast majority of our listeners, I don't know if it's going to be so rough for them. And the reason is because they've had an open mind to listen to this. You know, they don't have to believe you or me or your sources or my sources, but just the fact that they've listened and kept an open ear, I think will make it less rough on them. Because let's face it, Greg, when you start looking at a lot of this stuff, it's not pleasant.
No,
it's not.
That's right. You can't have
it's terrible because you learn that there are so many people at such high levels of power that are so dishonest, so corrupt,
criminal, fraudulent, robbing us.
It really gets to be disillusioning.
Yeah.
Right. But fortunately, we've been exposed to people. And that we have decided to come forward with the people that we're exposed to try to get the information to anyone willing to listen. You know, you and I both have a lot of people that point the fingers at us and, you know, call us a lot of names and that kind of thing. And okay, fine.
They're paid trolls, but okay.
Well, yeah, whatever. Right. And they're entitled to their opinion and that's fine.
And their paycheck.
Right, that's right. I mean, so, but the point is that there are going to be a lot of people that have been fed this propaganda for decades, that accepted it and just moved on and didn't take the necessary steps to try to ferret out if the information they were getting from the bought-off lamestream fake media was in fact correct or accurate.
And we may get some really big shakings here. Then at the end of October, at the end of September, beginning of October, you may see some really, even though we're getting one new high after another, we're hitting all-time highs. Just be careful for a financial hit. That's what Captain Austin Fitz said before. Now in the end of the year, we're going to take some big hits, plural, big financial hits. So you say, be ready.
Yeah, and you know what? And go back to that great interview you did with Catherine.
Yeah.
And if folks haven't seen it, they need to see it. If they've seen it once, I've watched it 3 times.
Wow.
I thought it was that great. And I'm not just saying that because, you know, we're here. It was that insightful. I think you had great questions. I think Catherine Austin Fitz is a very honest, courageous person who gave very truthful answers.
Yep.
And I do believe she gave great advice. And I think that, we'd all like to think that the stock market of 26,700 or 20, and the Stuart Varneys of the world pumping it up, that's wonderful and all is great. But unfortunately, I think it's a mirage.
Dave
And
Janda, oh, go ahead.
if you don't come to that realization, I think it's going to make the near future much harder to maneuver. I think if you're prepped for this mentally, I just don't mean having water and food and lead and a means to deliver the lead and maybe some gold and silver, but if you're not prepared mentally for coming attractions, I think it's going to make it very hard to maneuver the rapids ahead.
Dave Janda, DaveJanda.com, Operation Freedom, your radio show every Sunday. Fabulous stuff, fabulous guest interviews. You're a smart guy, journalist. Man, you went right out of being a orthopedic surgeon into a journalist. I just talked to you like you've been working with me, at the networks and local TV for years. But anyway, this is a good segment because about being prepared. And what I say at the end of every weekly news wrap up is prepare yourself mentally, physically, above all, spiritually. Fear not, God the Father and the Son, Jesus Christ, are in total control. Dave Janda, thank you so much for joining us today for the weekly news wrap-up. This was fun and very interesting. Thanks for adding your voice and your contacts and your experience. Thank you very much.